Hey guys, I'm Nitro X, and today I'm back here on the Reason YouTube channel for a video to provide tips and tricks for beginners using Reason to take their EDM beats to the next level. Let's get into it. So the first thing I want to talk about in production that you can use to take your beats to the next level is LFO. LFO stands for low frequency oscillator. Now, what an LFO is basically it's a sound wave oscillating at such a low frequency that you wouldn't be able to hear it. But what the LFO generates is changes in amplitude, which we can then use to control a parameter. Let me just pull one up here. Here's one right here. The Reason Pulsar LFO is the one I use in all of my stuff because when you go to the back, you can route everything you need from the LFO to whatever parameter you want on any rack extension or sometimes in a VST. So you can hit this little tempo sync button if you want it to be connected to the time of the track. Otherwise, you can turn that off and it will just be a free-flowing frequency range. So you can see here 43 hertz, you go all the way up really, and then down to really slow and low. So a good example of what I like to do with LFO is in my tracks is I will take like a little ambient shot that has a bunch of reverb on it or a nice tail, and I will go like this. I will throw an LFO on it. So this is what the sound sounds like beforehand. Then what I did was I just threw a kilohertz gain on here. You can do this with any volume plugin. Then what you want to do is create an automation lane for the LFO, as you can see I've made down here. And then you're going to want to automate something like this. It can be janky, it can be whatever. I created this simple line before, which you can do as well. You're going to want to find a point where it's not too fast at the start and not too slow at the end. A nice little ramp, or you can do it the other way. You can have it kind of rise. So let me show you what I have here with the LFO and what it sounds like. You hear how it kind of like starts really fast and it's going to slow down. Another option is this one's often better for transitions. For example, like let's say I reverse this sample and then I'm going to speed the LFO up. So you can use that as like a little reverse. So let's hear the difference. We have a reverse in here in this transition right before the drop. Or we can have it more as a hit like I had it before. Hear the difference? It just creates a different transition element that you can experiment rather than having a classic drum fill. And it adds a nice little bit of ear candy to a track. All right, so second, I want to talk about filters. Now, filters are an extremely integral part of EDM music and especially house music. I use filters in every single song, not only high-pass filtering instruments for mixing purposes, but what I'm really talking about here is using a filter as an effect to create energy, to create tension. For example, here in the build-up, we can use filters to create energy, to create a swell, because high end adds energy. So if we don't have as much high end, then we can kind of roll that high end up. So for example, on this vocal chop here, and you'll hear that in like every dance track. See the envelope coming up there? And then we have all the high end in the drop. For example, too, I made this 909 snare build up in Kong. I just loaded up a 909 snare. I think it's just from the Reason drum supply. But what I did is because there's so much like white noise in that snare, I took it and put a filter on it. And I had a pretty high Q on the filter. And you can hear it. Creating that sweep. And then by doing this, we're just adding to all the other risers that we've added into the track already. So that's creating even more tension and just making the build-up have more excitement. Yeah. And then the other kind of filter that I use a lot when making EDM, especially dance tracks, which I actually haven't put on this one yet, so we'll do it together. I'm going to grab the kilohertz filter here, and then I'm going to drag it into my master bus. And I'm going to switch it from being a low pass filter, which is what we were using on the previous examples of creating that sweep. And we're going to do a high pass filter on this one. Now, this one is going to help us swell up a little bit, almost so it's not noticeable in the low end. So when that drop hits, the contrast from there being no low end to all the bass right away is going to give it so much more energy. So all you got to do is hit edit automation, just like you would do for any of the other filter automation I was showing you. I'm going to create a little automation clip here. So I don't want to do too much because I want the buildup to still have the bass. So I don't want to do it for too long, but I'm going to do something like this. And then up here, and then as we reach the drop, I'm going to fade it back down. Just remember to keep it not going up too high so it's not creating too much of a drastic effect unless that's what you're going for. Trust your ear and trust what sounds good to you. Another great thing to do when you're creating any EDM track, especially house, is to use sidechaining. Sidechain to your kick. My kick's on quarter notes. This one's totally free. My friend Matthew Parker got me into this one. It's called Pump. You can set quarter notes and then it will just pump to your kick if you're making a house track. Depending on the sound I'm going for, I will sidechain it really hard or I won't as much. So I'll show you what it sounds like, for example, if you don't sidechain. You especially notice it on the bass. It starts to sound muddy and not like it's not glued together. But when you enable that, it adds like that extra bit of glue to the beat. I don't like going too hard on the sidechain because I find it can ruin the transients of stuff that might be hitting with the kick or hitting close to it. So I don't like to sidechain too hard depending on the project, but it's up to your personal preference. All right, so last thing I want to cover in this video that I've heard from multiple people who are kind of just starting out is that it's very hard to not make an EDM mix sound overwhelming. So for example, let me just break down what we have going on in the build up because that's where I got most of the elements. We got some bass, we have some piano, we have a downshifter, claps, some effects. And then we have some other melodic elements. And normally keeping in mind there would be vocals over this. I just don't have vocals on it yet from any singer. So we already want to keep this open sounding and not layer too much. But we still want to have a big sound. So how do we achieve that? Well, one is compression and layering. So these pianos, I have 3 different piano presets going here. I have an addictive keys preset on house keys, and then I have a radical piano on here. That sounds like this. So it's kind of a soft layer. See what I mean? This layer is way down. It's not all building up together. It's quieter. And this one is adding a lot of attack as well. So it's kind of understanding the purpose of each layer when you're mixing and the purpose of each element. And then that will determine how you're going to mix it and how loud it's going to be. So for example, once I've done all this, I will just throw an EQ on the whole bus. And then usually if you're creating EDM and you're creating a bunch of layers together, a great way to make it sound all together and glued without it sounding overwhelming and making it sound like one new sound is using OTT, whether you want to use a lot of it or a little bit of it. Get into OTT, start using it. It's great. But yeah, that's about all I wanted to cover in this video. Hopefully gives you a few new ideas to experiment with in your own music. Remember, keep it fun and keep it simple and enjoy the creating process. I will see you guys in a future video. Peace.